Hi, I'm Debbie. I'm the Managing Director at Jules Verne, and I'm really pleased to bring you this bonus episode of Travel for Curious Minds, having just recently returned from the Grand Egyptian Museum. I've asked Steve, our podcast producer, to join me in a conversation today so we can get this episode out to you ahead of the festive season.
This is great fun because, number one, I've never been on the Travel for Curious Minds podcast. Obviously, I've produced every episode, but this is my first time being on it, so I'm very excited. You're at your home office. I'm at my home office. You know, this is not a studio production because you were really keen to talk about your trip as soon as you came back, really, because there's so much to cover. And as you said, we wanted to get this episode out in time for people to be able to have a listen over the festive season. How many times have you been to Egypt?
Good question. I would say about 10 or 12 times over the years.
You must like it.
I do. I love Egypt. I have a bit of a soft spot for Egypt because growing up, I never travelled outside of the UK. We went on family holidays to West Witterings, sometimes East Witterings. And when I started working for Jules Verne, my first trip was to Egypt. And of course, we all grow up, don't we, learning about Egypt at school. So that just felt like such a treat, really exciting. The first time you travel overseas is somewhere like that. It was great, and I've loved it ever since.
But if you've been like 10 or 12 times, what's the draw? What is it you love about Egypt? Why do you keep going back?
I think it's a lot to do with the people. The people are so friendly, and it's the one comment we get consistently from customers. I'm not sure what people expect when they go to Egypt, but they just the Egyptian hospitality, the friendliness and the smiles, and of course the food, the good weather. Occasionally we crave a little bit of sunshine, and you're always guaranteed sunshine in Egypt. I think that Egypt also holds such kind of mystery to us. And I remember in school learning about, the pharaohs or the Nile, or kind of, hieroglyphs and all of that kind of stuff. So it kind of brings it all to life, all of the stuff that I learned in school in my early years. In terms of what I really love about Egypt, I think I love different things about different places in Egypt. Cairo, very big city, bustly, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot of people. It's exciting. And I remember the first time going to Egypt and staying in a hotel and being able to sort of spot the outline of the pyramids, right on the edge of the city, some way from the hotel. But I'll always remember that moment. And then in Luxor and Aswan, completely different. Typically, those places are warmer, they're more humid than Cairo. But to be sat on the East Bank looking across at the West Bank, it's the energy there. It's really difficult to describe, actually, but it feels almost biblical. The way people dress, seeing all of these incredible statues of the kings just as you're driving down the road, of course, going over to the Valley of the Kings. There's just so much to see. There's so much to take in. But I think for me, it feels magical. That's how that destination feels.
A recurring theme on these podcast episodes is food. We love food. What's Egyptian food like for people who've never been?
I think that's a really interesting question, right? Because when I first started going to Egypt, I think it had a reputation, particularly on Nile cruises, for people kind of getting a bit sick. And it's just not like that anymore. On the boats that we use, we actually have the executive chef is from the Four Seasons in Cairo. He's trained all of the staff on board. The levels of hygiene are impeccable, using kind of filtered water or mineral water to cleanse every piece of food. The food itself, the presentation of the food, is incredible. I've not had anything like it even here in the UK. So it's of course something to be enjoyed. There's lots of it. You still need to be a bit careful, right? It's hot out in Egypt, and you need to be drinking lots of water and all of that kind of stuff, and not overindulging. But it's certainly more of a centerpiece of the trip compared to sort of, if I go back kind of 20, 30 years, I'd say. But even in restaurants, there's so much choice in restaurants now. Yes, you can get Egyptian food, Lebanese food, but equally you can grab a burger, or there's some good vegetarian dishes out there. What seems to be in Cairo quite appealing to the Egyptians, at least, is more of a tea shop type of environment where people will have sandwiches or salads or soups. So there's really something for everyone.
There'll be a number of people listening who will have been to Egypt, but they haven't really been to Egypt. And what I mean by that is, I think back to Simon Reeve when we chatted with Simon Reeve in that episode, and he talked about get out of the hotel, get out of the all-inclusive place. And there are a lot of people who go to Egypt because it's the sun, but they never leave the hotel. They're not really experiencing Egypt. They're experiencing a hotel. Obviously, Jules Verne is more about tours and guides and getting to see the real world. What should people go and see and experience about Egypt that they don't get to see if they're on a package holiday in an all-inclusive hotel that they never leave?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, actually, because, of course, when people are going to Egypt, they want to see the main sites, and of course you want to go to the pyramids and maybe the Grand Egyptian Museum, or you want to go to the Valley of the Kings, and those things are important. It's kind of, forms the sort of foundations for the reasons why people might be going to that destination. But yeah, just to be kind of based at a hotel, leaving a hotel to do a trip and coming back, you're not really experiencing that kind of the depth of the destination and what it has to offer. I think, a couple of things here for me. Firstly, one of the hotels we use in Egypt is actually in Cairo. Cairo is expanding. You've got kind of downtown Cairo, and it's expanding outwards, and you've got this new area now, which has got more of an Emirati style feel to it. It's very modern. Lots of Egyptians are kind of living out that way, and one of the hotels we use has kind of access to a bit of a plaza where you've got cafes and restaurants and shops, and it's really, people feel really safe. The feedback we've had from our customers, particularly solo travelers, they feel really safe leaving the hotel, wandering around, sitting outside a coffee shop, having a coffee and people watching. And there you can see these kind of the young Egyptians, going out for the evening together. And when I think about Luxor, or even Cairo actually, but Luxor, kind of getting lost in the souks or bazaars, buying souvenirs for home, chatting to the locals, having a coffee in amongst all of that hubbub that's going on in the souks is a great way to soak up that local atmosphere and feel a little bit more immersed in the destination. And talking to people, obviously we've got some great guides that will tell you all about Egypt and their civilization, but also they will share with you some personal stories. But to get a different perspective from, I don't know, a local taxi driver or a shopkeeper, to learn a bit more about their life, whether that's their working life or their family life. I think that's that real, where you feel really connected to a destination, actually is through the people that are in their destination more than the sites, which typically is what drives people to go to these destinations.
The idea of, really connecting with people and getting to see and hear people's stories. Every guest that's been on this podcast, the ones who've told the most interesting stories, it's always been about the bus breaking down and them being forced into a position where they connect with people rather than being in that sanitized hotel package kind of environment. As Simon Reeve said, it's safer than you think. You might be slightly outside of your comfort zone, but you learn when you're outside of your comfort zone. You fully enjoy yourself, and it's an actual experience rather than something packaged and sanitized and without really experiencing. So I've got coffee culture. That surprises me. I wouldn't have thought that. That's interesting. The vibrancy of Cairo, going to the souks and the bazaars, and talking to the guides and learning about their families and their stories and so on. So we put the episode out with Tarek and Rania, which hopefully our listeners have just listened to. It's just come out before this episode. Jules Verne, you have a very special relationship with Tarek and Rania and their business, don't you? What is it about that relationship? Have you been working together for long?
I joined Jules Verne 35 years ago, and I met Tarek on my first
When you were 10?
trip when I was 10.
Yeah.
So when we're sending people around the world, what's really important is that you have absolute faith and trust that the people on the ground are going to look after your customers. I mean, that's really important. And we have that trust with Tarek. The detail is very important to him, and that he recruits the right people. You know, whether that's the airline reps that are there to meet our guests on arrival, whether it's the guides, whether it's the staff that he's got working across his boats, that we know that that is taken care of. Apart from the fact that, you know, he always has some great ideas, and that he will make sure we're sourcing tickets for the Grand Egyptian Museum, for example, and providing kind of good quality transportation. You know, all these things like really, really matter. And the fact that we've been working with him for so long, it's not just about the trust, it's the fact that we've got a good relationship. So when I know that when there are things that we want to, I don't know, new tours we want to create, or whether there are changes we want to make to existing tours, we know that we've got somebody who will work with us on that and kind of make it happen.
I remember in the episode he was talking about, because he's a real character, isn't he? And we were talking about going and, you know, finding broken down old vessels and turning them into something remarkable. And what's really clear is his passion for Jules Verne and the customers, and his passion to make the experience really interesting. You know, he's got a real love, hasn't he? And that, well, both of them have, and that really comes across in their conversation. And I'd imagine in the experience that your guests have with them.
I think traveling with us, or traveling in a small group, what you get with that is a sense of safety. You're guided through that experience. You know, you really just don't have to think about it too much, because everything is taken care of for you. You're going to be collected on arrival, taken to your accommodation, supported throughout. Great guide, great group of like-minded travelers who are with you to sort of share that experience. So it's a great way to travel.
And the centerpiece, the jewel in the crown that Tarek and Rania talked about experiencing before it was open, but that you have experienced now open, is the gem, the Grand Egyptian Museum. So, just let loose on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible, isn't it? I mean, we've obviously, the world has been waiting for this to open for what feels like years. So when we recorded this podcast a few years ago with Tarek and Rania, and Rania was talking about the gem, and she was talking about Ramesses and a floating obelisk, I thought, well, that sounds interesting. And I went on a work trip actually shortly after that, and I said, can I just go and have a look? And it was impressive even then, right? So really then, none of the artifacts, or barely any, were there, or certainly they weren't on display at that time. So all we managed to see was the museum itself, the floating obelisk, which Rania talks about, and Ramesses, but really not much else. And then this time, it's incredible. I mean, I was there with a group this time. We took a private group of women, actually, who booked through Jules Verne. So that was a really interesting experience for me, because I was not only seeing the Grand Egyptian Museum in all its glory, but I was experiencing it with a group of women who hadn't been to Egypt before.
Okay.
And it's a bit like Christmas, right? You know, like seeing Christmas through the eyes of a child. It was a little bit like that. We were driving in from Cairo airport, and it was late on a Thursday evening, and it was dark, and the guide said, and here on the right you can see the Grand Egyptian Museum. And there were kind of gasps from around the coach, like people getting out their phones and eager to take photographs. It was all lit up. It looked beautiful. And at that point I thought, oh yeah, I suppose it's quite an impressive building. You know, it is. And then visiting it on the day we visited it, and obviously it had such a buzz about it, you know, with a lot of people there, not too crowded, but a lot of people there. No doubt many of them have been just waiting for it to open, experiencing it for the first time. There was a great buzz. Yeah, so as you walk into the entrance of the Grand Egyptian Museum, you see the statue of Ramesses II, and this was at the main railway station in Cairo for many years, and they moved him across. Okay. That's probably, I would say, one of the most popular images that I'm seeing on social media from people that have been is that statue is huge, and it's so impressive. It gives you a sense of the size and scale of the building, you know, that something as big as that is actually housed inside the museum. He's surrounded by very shallow water, which kind of adds to the look and feel, right,
Okay.
of the statue. But I have seen two people run up to this statue, not noticing the water, but you're kind of so impressed and looking up,
Yeah.
you need to be looking down and
You don't want to
spot
walk into
the
it.
water. The first time it was a small child that did it, and that kind of was okay.
Face plant.
The second time it was an adult, you know, be embarrassing.
So let me just try and get that in my mind. You've got this massive statue in a building.
It's beautiful. I mean, it's probably my favorite thing actually about music, because it's that first impression. You walk in, you see that, you can't help but think, wow. Obviously lots of people wanting to take photos and videos, so it kind of draws quite a crowd even in the entrance. So when you've got kind of a load of people that are all there for a shared purpose, you know, you're all there because you're interested in learning and you want to see all this stuff, such a buzz. And I think particularly at the moment, with it being so new, you really get a sense that people who are there now they consider themselves lucky, right?
Okay.
They're not seeing this place like years down the line, they're seeing it right now. And so a great atmosphere. So I think the location of this museum is really special. You know, the old museum is a beautiful building. Inside, lots of rooms, not that comfortable to walk around in. Whereas this, you've got such space. It really is incredible how that changes your experience of viewing all of these artifacts. And with the galleries overlooking the pyramids, that feels really special as well. You know, it just feels like it should have always been there, you know, or all of these artifacts are where they belong. It just feels like the right place for them
So
in
so the
Egypt.
galleries, they look out, do they?
Yeah.
Out to the pyramids, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
So when you go into into the entrance of the museum, and you've got this great statue of Ramesses II, you then proceed through up the grand staircase, and it's kind of like a travelator, where you're slowly moving up to windows that overlook the pyramids, but on the way up you're seeing some amazing kind of statues, and you can take that all in whilst effectively standing still. You can also walk up, and some people will choose to do that, or they will be guided up. The guide wants to show them certain pieces, but it's impressive. It is impressive.
And then as you kind of go through the different galleries, how's it arranged? Is it sort of arranged through the ages, or what's the layout?
Yeah, it's arranged in sort of different civilizations, and there's over, I think, 100,000 artifacts displayed. And I think there's at least 10,000 artifacts that have never been displayed before. So one of the big attractions is obviously the boy king, Tutankhamun. I mean, it was in the old museum. And I've been, you know, several times to the old museum, and honestly, the only thing that I could recall from those visits is the mask, and it is what people want to see. They want to see that mask, but it blew me away in this museum. This is the first time that they've got all of his treasures displayed together. And it's just incredible, you know, and when they found this tomb, it was much smaller than the other tombs of the other kings, yet there was just as much stuff, you know, packed in there with him, and they don't know whether that's why that is, because he was only a boy king, and one of the theories is actually perhaps the other kings did have more stuff, but it was stolen, you know, over the years. But
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
got everything there, you know, from the mask through to tiny beads that were that form part of the jewelry that he wore. It's almost it's just difficult to comprehend, right? That they've kind of, Howard Carter has kind of come across this tomb, found all of this stuff, and now it's displayed. And I think the way these things are displayed as well is really clever. I mean, it's just in beautiful cases. The lighting is obviously just right. It just showcases everything. And I'm not just talking about Tutankhamun, but I think it's the space in the museum, the way everything is kind of laid out. It's the lighting. It's that you can really get to enjoy the experience. What you're seeing, it just really stays with you, or it has at least with me.
I remember Tarek saying he was saying that you could spend a week there, and at the time I kind of thought, is he overselling it? But by the sounds of it, there's so much there that potentially to really get into the detail and learn all the stories and get a feeling for what this is all about, you probably could spend a week there.
Yeah, I think you could, and that's an interesting one in itself, isn't it? Because I think that we have had customers already who have requested second visits back in the same trip.
Wow.
I think that everyone has their own reasons for wanting to visit the gem. Some is just to go and have a look and say they've been there, or perhaps their focus is on Tutankhamun, and others have much more vested interest in Egypt and all those stories and the Egyptology and such like.
Were you based in Cairo when you went on this occasion?
Yeah, so we were based in Cairo. We have a tour called Gems of Cairo, and that goes to Cairo for a 4-night stay, and we include a visit to the museum. We also go to the pyramids. So there's a whole program, but it's centered around Cairo.
And that's a 4-night stay. And presumably you do other tours where people can see more of Egypt and travel further and explore a bit more, as well as taking in Cairo and the gem.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do the combination between sort of kind of the Upper Nile region, sort of Luxor and Aswan and Cairo. We do a long cruise that kind of cruises all the way up to Cairo, or going in the other direction. So there are some people that haven't been to Egypt before and they want to do that. I think the Nile cruise feels quite significant for people, and it is incredible when you're sort of sat up on deck and you're almost watching this story unfold as you're sailing down the Nile, whether that's, I don't know, kind of cattle coming to the Nile for a drink, or it's children coming to wave, or local vendors on their rowing boats kind of trying to sell you their wares. Beautiful scenery. I think a Nile cruise has a lot to offer. So I think with what we offer now in Egypt, there's something for everyone. There's something for the first timer. There's something for those who are returning to Egypt.
And that's kind of coming back full circle to where we started. That's really interesting that as someone, you're in the business, you know your onions, and if somewhere is not worth visiting, you wouldn't pay it a second visit. So the fact that you've been a dozen times, and yet you're still as excited about this trip as it sounds like you would have, been when you were 20. That says something about the gem and Egypt's enduring charm, that it's just an amazing place to keep revisiting.
Yeah, absolutely.
You said when we spoke before we started recording about you have a view that actually it's going to drive a lot of people into Egypt, and actually getting high quality tours and getting a really good experience might start to become tricky as time goes on. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
there's a bit of a sense of urgency.
Yeah, and we've seen in the last 2-3 weeks, I would say, now people are realising that the museum's open. We've had to add more departure dates to our programme to cater for that demand, and we're very lucky again working with Tarek to be able to access those tickets to the museum, so that we can send groups out there. But I kind of really feel that now is the time to go, or 2026 is the time to go. because I think it's only going to get more popular as word spreads. Obviously, we've all heard that it's been due to open, but as more people talk about it, and I don't know about you, Steve, but the last couple of weeks there's lots of media coverage on the museum. There's lots of stuff on social media, and it's just going to get busier and busier. So, my personal view is that 2026 is the year to go. And who knows, you might go and might want to go back a second time, right?
Well, and also I guess being in there right at the start and seeing it in its kind of inaugural year, as you said, you've got people that went on that trip that are ready to book up again. And something else that Tarek talked about is the rate at which artifacts change. And I mean, I don't know what the official figure is. I'm sure it will change over time, but it sounds like the reality is that you could go once, go back 2 months later and have a different experience. So it sounds like it's important to kind of to start to explore that now. So obviously people can go onto the Jules Verne website and they can research that Gems of Cairo tour you talked about is on there, and you also have a blog on the Jules Verne website, which you've said to me before that articles and stories are going to start to come on there for people to pay attention to. And of course, if they subscribe to this fantastic podcast, they'll get further updates and so on. So Debbie, thank you so much for spending time talking to us and telling us about your fantastic trip. It's really exciting. Listeners obviously can find out more, put all the information in the show notes and so on. This special episode of Travel for Curious Minds we've kind of produced quickly so we can get it out over the festive period for people to listen. But there will be more next year, won't there?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in the process of recording our next series of Travel for Curious Minds. We've got some great guests lined up, some great stories. So looking forward to that, to bringing all of that to everyone next year. So make sure you subscribe.